Long before the flood, before Noah's ark sailed upon the waters, there was a story so terrifying it was hidden from most of our Bibles. The book of Enoch speaks of angels who abandoned heaven, lusted after mortal women, and gave birth to monstrous giants, the Nephilim. These beings were not only giants in stature but in wickedness, spreading violence, bloodshed, and corruption across the earth. They devoured crops, animals, and when nothing was left, they turned on mankind itself. But what makes their tale even darker is this. In Enoch's writings, these Nephilim were described as worse than Satan. For while Satan tempts the soul, these creatures devoured flesh, destroyed bloodlines, and brought the world to the brink of annihilation. This is the forbidden story, from the descent of the Watchers to the birth of the Nephilim and their ultimate judgment. A story of betrayal, terror, and divine justice. The story of how beings worse than Satan nearly erased mankind from existence. The story begins not on earth, but in the vast expanse of heaven, where countless angels carried out the will of the Most High. Among them was a distinct order known as the Watchers. Their role was not to lead or command, but to quietly observe humanity. They were guardians at a distance, set in place to watch over mankind, but never to interfere. For a time, they remained faithful. But as generations of humans multiplied across the earth, something within these angels began to shift. Their eyes lingered too long on the beauty of mortal women. Their admiration twisted into temptation, and temptation into desire. At the head of this restless longing was a powerful angel named Semjaza. Unlike the others, he dared to speak the thought aloud. Let us go down to them. Let us take wives from among the daughters of men, for their beauty is pleasing to us. The other watchers hesitated. They knew this act would break the eternal law. Angels were not meant to cross the boundary between heaven and earth. To do so would be to corrupt the order of creation itself. But Semjaza was persuasive. He reminded them that if only one of them fell, he alone would bear the punishment. If they were to fall, they must fall together. And so, he bound them with an oath. 200 angels swore upon one another that they would not turn back, that they would descend as one. Fear was swallowed by desire, and desire gave birth to rebellion. They descended upon Mount Hermon, their landing place upon the earth. There, they took wives from among mortal women, defiling the sacred boundary between heaven and earth. These were not fleeting encounters but lasting unions, for they married and lay with them as men do. The heavens watched in silence, for the Watchers had chosen desire over obedience. What had once been holy was now corrupted. And from this forbidden act came consequences no mortal could imagine. For the wombs of women carried not the seed of men, but the unnatural offspring of angels. Children of two worlds, belonging fully to neither. The earth trembled as they were born, giants, fierce and unholy. They would be called the Nephilim. From the moment the Watchers crossed the boundary between heaven and earth, the world would never be the same. Their union with mortal women produced beings unlike anything creation had ever seen. These were not ordinary children. They were giants, towering in stature and unmatched in strength. They were the Nephilim. At first they seemed like gods among men. Their size and power inspired awe, and their presence commanded fear. But quickly their true nature was revealed. They were not made in the image of God, nor fully like their angelic fathers. They were corrupted hybrids, cursed from birth. Neither heavenly nor earthly, their very existence was an abomination. As they grew, the Nephilim became violent and uncontrollable. Their appetites were insatiable, their thirst for dominance unquenchable. They conquered villages, enslaved people, and set themselves as rulers over mankind. Where humans sought peace, the Nephilim brought terror. Where men built, they destroyed. The earth groaned under their presence. They consumed crops and animals in staggering amounts, devouring the land's resources faster than they could be replenished. And still, it was not enough. Their hunger deepened into madness. The Nephilim turned against mankind itself. What began as awe and fear soon turned into horror. Humans were hunted, slaughtered, and devoured. Stories spread of monstrous beings feasting upon human flesh, their giant shadows darkening the earth as villages were wiped from existence. No longer were the Nephilim rulers, they had become predators. But their destruction did not end with hunger. For from their fathers, the fallen angels, came forbidden knowledge. The Watchers taught humanity what was never meant to be known: weapons of war, the secrets of sorcery, enchantments, and the signs of the stars. With this knowledge came bloodshed, corruption, and pride. Humanity, once innocent, was led into darkness. The world descended into chaos. Men no longer lived in harmony with the earth or with one another. Violence, idolatry, and bloodshed filled the land, and it was the Nephilim who stood at the center of it all. They were no longer just giants. They were destroyers, creatures of terror who devoured both flesh and soul. This was the true legacy of the Watchers' rebellion. Not just broken laws, but the birth of beings who would soon prove themselves worse than Satan himself. The Nephilim were not the only curse left behind by the Watchers. For along with their children, the fallen angels themselves brought a far more subtle, yet equally devastating corruption: the gift of forbidden knowledge. When the Watchers first descended, they were clothed in glory that no man had ever seen. To mortals, they appeared as radiant beings, dazzling in power and wisdom. And from this position of awe, they began to teach humanity secrets that were never meant to be revealed. Semjaza, their leader, taught men the arts of enchantments and root cuttings, sorcery and witchcraft that called upon powers beyond their understanding. Another, Azazel, revealed the making of weapons: swords, knives, shields, and armor, tools that turned men into killers. The delicate balance of life and death was shattered, for now blood could be spilled more easily than ever before. Others taught the signs of the stars and the movement of heavenly bodies, not as signs of wonder pointing to the Creator, but as tools of divination. Astrology, forbidden by God, spread among mankind, twisting their hearts to trust in stars rather than in the one who made them. Even the women were corrupted. They were taught the art of adornment, the use of cosmetics, the painting of faces, and the wearing of jewelry in ways that stirred lust and vanity. What should have been natural beauty became another snare, another chain binding mankind in pride. At first, men marveled at these new powers, but soon these gifts brought only ruin. With weapons came endless bloodshed. With sorcery came curses, demonic influence, and despair. With astrology came false guidance, leading whole nations astray. Humanity, once innocent and simple, was dragged into darkness far beyond what Satan's whispers alone could have achieved. The Watchers claimed to elevate mankind with wisdom. Instead, they enslaved them with corruption. The knowledge they gave was not light, but poison disguised as treasure. It spread through generations, building a world soaked in blood and bound in sin. The heavens looked on in grief. What had been pure was now tainted. What had been holy was now profane. The children of men had not just been deceived, they had been armed with the very tools of their own destruction. This was the curse of forbidden knowledge, a curse that would drive humanity to the brink of annihilation and prepare the way for judgment. The weight of the Watchers' rebellion soon pressed heavily upon the world. With the Nephilim walking the earth and forbidden knowledge spreading like wildfire, creation itself began to unravel. The Nephilim, towering giants of monstrous strength, grew restless in their hunger. At first, they consumed the fruits of the land, harvesting fields, stripping orchards, and draining rivers of fish. But their vast appetites could not be satisfied. What mankind grew for survival, the Nephilim devoured for sport. crops vanished, herds of livestock were slaughtered, and famine followed wherever they dwelled. Still, their hunger deepened. When the earth's abundance was gone, the Nephilim turned their gaze upon humanity itself. Villages fell not only to their weapons, but to their teeth. Men, women, and even children became prey. Tales spread of giants feasting on human flesh, bones crushed in their hands as they consumed what they were never meant to touch. Humanity, once the crown of creation, became nothing more than livestock in the eyes of these abominations. And the Watchers, their angelic fathers, did not stop them. Instead, they reveled in the chaos. They taught humans how to wage war, and the Nephilim enforced their rule with blood. Nations crumbled under their might, and the earth itself cried out. The violence was unending. Innocence was lost. The blood of the innocent stained the soil, rising like a bitter cry to heaven. What had once been a world of harmony between man, beast, and nature had become a wasteland of fear and destruction. And worse, humanity followed their example. Men learned greed, lust, and murder from their giant overlords. They no longer sought the Creator but bowed to idols, false gods born from the teachings of the fallen. The corruption spread deeper than flesh. It poisoned the soul. The earth itself was no longer pure. The balance of creation had been broken. Death and bloodshed covered every corner of the world, until even the angels who had remained faithful looked on in horror. It was no longer just a matter of sin. The very survival of humanity was at stake. For if the Nephilim continued unchecked, mankind would be consumed entirely, body and soul erased from the face of the earth. And so, the heavens stirred. Judgment was near. In most traditions, Satan is remembered as the great enemy of mankind, the deceiver, the accuser, the one who whispers lies into the hearts of men. He tempted Adam and Eve in the garden. He seeks to lead souls astray from the path of God. His weapon has always been deception. But the book of Enoch paints a far darker picture. For while Satan tempts, the Nephilim destroyed. These hybrid giants, born of heaven's rebellion and earth's frailty, were not satisfied with twisting the soul. They corrupted both body and spirit at once. Their very existence broke creation's order. And unlike Satan, who prowled like a shadow, the Nephilim walked openly in the daylight, crushing villages beneath their feet, devouring mankind without shame. To call them worse than Satan was no exaggeration. Consider this. Satan's rebellion was one of spirit. He sought to rival God, to accuse men before the throne. But the Nephilim brought rebellion into flesh and blood. They polluted the human line, erasing the purity of creation. Their fathers, the Watchers, passed down knowledge meant only for heaven. They armed men with weapons, chained women with vanity, and entangled the innocent with sorcery. The corruption was total. Satan lures mankind toward destruction, but the Nephilim dragged humanity there by force. Satan whispers temptation, but the Nephilim ruled with violence, terror, and cannibalistic hunger. Where Satan plots in secret, the Nephilim stood in plain sight, giants of death who left behind only ruin. And when the people cried out, when the land itself was defiled, even the heavens testified that these beings were a greater threat than Satan himself. For while Satan sought to enslave mankind's soul, the Nephilim sought to annihilate mankind entirely. This is why their sin was unlike any other. This is why their judgment would be swifter, harsher, and eternal. For the Nephilim were not simply fallen. They were abominations, a stain upon creation that could not be allowed to endure. In them, heaven's glory and earth's weakness had produced a horror, a living nightmare. Beings whose evil made Satan's schemes seem small in comparison. And so, the Most High prepared his response. For the world could not endure their corruption forever. Judgment was coming, and the Nephilim's reign of terror was about to meet its end. The cries of the earth rose to heaven. The blood of the innocent stained the soil, and creation itself groaned beneath the weight of corruption. The Watchers had broken their oath. The Nephilim had filled the world with violence, and humanity was drowning in sin. The Most High would not remain silent. Heaven summoned its mightiest guardians, the archangels Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel. Each was given a command, a mission to restore balance to a world on the brink of annihilation. To Michael, the warrior of heaven, came the order: bind the leaders of the Watchers, cast them into the depths of the earth, and seal them in chains until the day of judgment. No longer would they walk freely among men. Their rebellion had ended in disgrace. To Raphael the healer was given the task of binding Azazel, the one who had revealed weapons and led mankind into endless bloodshed. He was cast into a desert, covered in jagged stones and buried in darkness until the final reckoning. His name would forever be cursed. To Gabriel came the command to set the giants against one another. The Nephilim, once united in terror, turned on themselves in chaos and slaughter. Their great strength became their downfall, as their own violence consumed them. And to Uriel, the angel of wisdom, was given the most dreadful mission: to warn Noah of the coming flood. For God had decreed that only one family, righteous in their generation, would survive. The rest of mankind, corrupted and enslaved by the Watchers' influence, would be washed away. The heavens trembled as the judgment was set in motion. The chains of the Watchers clanged in the abyss, their cries silenced by the weight of God's decree. The Nephilim, mighty as they were, could not escape the hand of heaven. Their bodies fell, their reign ended, and their souls, twisted and restless, became cursed spirits, wandering the earth as demons. Then came the waters. The fountains of the deep burst open, the skies split apart, and a flood unlike anything the world had ever seen swept across the earth. The Nephilim perished. The corrupted world was cleansed. And Noah, carried in the ark, became the seed of a new beginning. But the story did not end there. For though their bodies died, the spirits of the Nephilim remained, restless and hostile. Shadows of their rebellion still linger among mankind, a reminder of why judgment had to fall. When the waters of the flood receded, the world was silent. The cries of the Nephilim were no more. Their towering forms lay buried beneath the earth, their kingdoms reduced to nothing but ruins washed away by the judgment of God. The Watchers, once radiant beings clothed in glory, remained bound in darkness, chained in the abyss until the final day when they would face eternal fire. For a time, the world breathed again. Humanity began anew through Noah and his sons. The land, once drenched in blood, was cleansed. Yet the shadow of the Nephilim did not vanish entirely. For their spirits, twisted and restless, were not destroyed by the waters. The book of Enoch declares that the souls of the giants became evil spirits upon the earth, condemned to wander without rest. Where their bodies fell, their spirits lingered, roaming, corrupting, whispering into the minds of men. These became the demons that plague humanity even now, unseen but ever present, seeking to continue the work of their fathers. And though the Watchers remain imprisoned, their influence echoes through generations. Ancient traditions, occult practices, forbidden knowledge, they all trace back to the corruption first taught by those fallen angels. Their rebellion was chained, but the scars they left on humanity endure. Even giants would rise again. In later ages, whispers of their bloodline surfaced. In Canaan, in the Anakim, in the mighty warrior Goliath who stood against Israel, remnants of the Nephilim appeared like shadows of a dark past. Though diminished, their presence reminded mankind of what once nearly consumed the world. The lesson was clear. Evil does not always begin with loud rebellion. Sometimes it begins with a desire that goes unchecked, a boundary crossed, a temptation embraced. The Watchers fell not because they were weak, but because they chose desire over obedience. Their children, the Nephilim, showed the cost of such rebellion, corruption so deep it nearly erased mankind. And this is why they were remembered as worse than Satan. For Satan tempted, but the Nephilim devoured. Satan whispered lies, but the Nephilim spilled blood. Satan sought to accuse, but the Nephilim sought to annihilate. The story of Enoch closes not simply with destruction, but with warning. A reminder that some rebellions are so great, so devastating that they shake creation itself. And though the flood ended their reign, their shadows remain, haunting mankind until the final judgment. If this story shook your perspective, imagine what other truths might still be hidden in the shadows of forgotten texts. Do you believe the Nephilim were truly worse than Satan himself? Or is there a deeper mystery waiting to be uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice adds to this investigation. If you found this journey eye-opening, hit that like button and share this video with friends who love unraveling ancient secrets. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next revelation we uncover together. The story doesn't end here. It's only the beginning.